I found a missing persons flyer at a gas station. It has my face on it. I left home when I was 19. I didn't run away in the middle of the night or pack a bag in secret. I told my mother to her face that I was leaving, and she told me I'd be back within a week because I couldn't survive without her. I'd been hearing that my whole life, that I was too stupid to live on my own, that I'd end up on the street, that nobody out there was going to take care of me the way she did. The way she took care of me was by controlling every single thing I did. She picked what I wore. She picked who I talked to. She went through my phone every night before bed and read every message and every call log. If I came home 5 minutes late from school, she'd sit me at the kitchen table and make me account for every minute. If I talked to a boy she didn't approve of, she'd call his parents. She pulled me out of clubs. She stopped me from getting a job because she said I needed to be home where she could see me. She told me everything she did was because she loved me more than anyone else ever would. I believed her until I was about 16. Then I just survived until I could leave. The day I turned 19, I packed 2 bags and took a bus to a city 4 hours away, where a girl I knew said I could stay with her until I got on my feet. My mother stood in the doorway and watched me leave, and the last thing she said was, "You're going to come crawling back." I didn't come back. I got a job at a copy shop within 2 weeks. I found a room to rent with 3 other girls. I taught myself how to do my own taxes and open a bank account, and all the things my mother never let me learn, because keeping me helpless was how she kept me close. For 8 months, I was free, and I didn't talk to my mother once. She called me a few times in the beginning, and I didn't pick up. Her voicemail started sad and turned angry. The last one said I was an ungrateful child, and that she hoped the world taught me a lesson she couldn't. And after that, the calls stopped, and I thought she was done. Then I walked into a gas station on a Tuesday morning to buy a coffee, and there was a flyer taped to the window next to the door. It had my face on it, my senior year school photo. Underneath it said my full name, my height, my weight, and in big letters at the top, it said missing. At the bottom, it had my mother's phone number and a sentence that said, "If you have any information about my daughter, please call." I stood in front of that flyer for a long time. I wasn't missing. I told her I was leaving. I walked out of that house with bags in my hands in broad daylight while she watched me go. She knew I left on purpose. She knew I was alive. She knew I didn't want to be found. And she put up flyers anyway. I went inside and asked the cashier how long the flyer had been there. And he said a woman came in about a month ago crying, and he felt bad, so he let her put it up. A month. She'd been putting up flyers in a city she somehow figured out I was in. I took the flyer off the window and left. Over the next few days, I found more. One at the laundromat on my block. One at the diner where I sometimes ate breakfast. One at the library I went to every Saturday. She hadn't just come to my city. She'd mapped out my life. She'd found the places I went and put her flyers there so that the people around me would see my face and call her. She wanted strangers to report my location to her like I was a lost dog. I called her that night from a number she wouldn't recognize. She picked up on the first ring. I said, "It's me." She started crying and said, "Oh, thank God, where are you? I've been worried sick." I said, "You know where I am. You put flyers at my laundromat." She went quiet and then said, "I'm your mother and I had every right to look for you." I said, "I'm 19 and I left on my own and you know that." She said, "It doesn't matter how old you are. A mother doesn't stop worrying." I said, "This isn't worrying. This is tracking me down." She said, "You're making me sound like a monster when all I did was look for my child." I said, "I'm not your child anymore. I'm an adult who left." She said, "You'll always be my child and I will never stop looking for you no matter where you go." That sentence right there is the one that told me everything. I hung up the phone with my hands shaking because my mother said she would never stop looking for me no matter where I went. And I sat on my bed trying to figure out what to do because she'd found my city, found the places I went, and put up flyers like I was a missing dog expecting strangers to call her with updates on where I was and what I was doing. And I couldn't call the police because saying my mom is looking for me but I'm not actually missing sounded stupid. And I thought about moving, but I had a job and a room and friends and a whole life I built from nothing, and I didn't do anything wrong. The next morning, I told my roommate Nadine everything, and she said we needed to go see how many flyers there were. And we walked a 6-block area around our apartment and found 7 at the corner store, bus stop, grocery store, post office, bookstore, and the pizza place where we got dinner every Friday, each one with my face on it at places I went regularly. And Nadine said my mom had been following me because she had to have been watching me for weeks to know all these places, and the thought made me feel sick. Nadine said I needed to tell Keith, our landlord, so if my mother showed up, he wouldn't give out information, and I felt humiliated explaining that my own mother was basically stalking me, but Keith said he wouldn't give out any tenant information and would make extra sure in my case. The next day, my boss Gavin pulled me aside and showed me a flyer someone had put on the break room community board where all my coworkers could see it, and I had to explain I wasn't missing. I left home on purpose. My mother was putting up flyers anyway, and Gavin took it down and said he'd tell the front desk not to accept more and wouldn't confirm I worked there if she called. On my lunch break, I searched online and found forums full of people dealing with controlling parents who couldn't let go, learned the word estrangement, and everyone kept saying document everything, and if it gets bad enough, consider a restraining order. Over the next week, I kept finding new flyers at my coffee shop, my morning bus stop, and the park where I sometimes sat and read, and each one meant my mother had been here knowing my entire routine, and I started changing everything. Different routes, new coffee shop 4 blocks away, not going to the park, varying what time I left, looking over my shoulder constantly, and realized even though she hadn't physically confronted me, she'd already taken away my sense of safety and freedom. Nadine found me staring at nothing on the couch one night and said I needed professional help, and she'd already found a community center offering free counseling. And the next day, I made an appointment with Julie Goodman, who specialized in family issues. Once I started talking to Julie, I couldn't stop, telling her everything from my mother controlling every part of my life growing up to leaving at 19 to the 8 months of freedom to the flyers and the phone call. And Julie said very clearly that what my mother was doing was harassment, and I had the right to live my own life. And hearing that made something break loose in my chest, because part of me still wondered if I was ungrateful or cruel. Julie explained enmeshment, how some parents can't see where they end and their children begin and think their kids are parts of themselves instead of separate people. Said it wasn't love, but control disguised as love. And all those years I thought I was the problem, but my mother's behavior had a name and patterns, and I wasn't crazy for leaving. Julie told me to document everything, so I started taking photos of every flyer, saving voicemails, writing down dates and locations, building a folder that felt like a case against my own mother. But Julie said it was about protecting myself and having proof. 2 weeks later, Gavin told me a woman called the copy shop asking for me by full name, claiming a family emergency, and when he wouldn't confirm I worked there, she got upset, and she'd found my work number and was getting closer. I went to the police station and explained I was 19 and left home voluntarily, and my mother was putting up flyers and calling my workplace. And the officer looked skeptical, saying it sounded like a worried mother, but I said she knew exactly where I was because she'd been following me, and he gave me a case number. Julie helped me write a cease and desist letter saying I was an adult who left voluntarily. I didn't want contact. Her attempts constituted harassment, and if she didn't stop, I'd pursue legal action. And we sent it certified mail. The week after I mailed it, I found 3 new flyers in one day at places I'd never been, meaning she was spreading out and probably paying someone since she lived 4 hours away. Then Nadine came home saying she'd seen a woman matching my mother's description in our building hallway, asking a neighbor if they knew me and showing a photo, and my mother had been in my home, the place I was supposed to feel safe, and I said I didn't know what to do anymore. Julie said we needed to talk about a restraining order and walked me through what it involved: filing paperwork, a hearing, my mother being served, and said it wasn't me being cruel, but protecting myself from someone who wouldn't respect my boundaries, no matter how clearly I stated them. I spent days gathering everything: photos of flyers, voicemails, call logs, the cease and desist, the police report, written statements from Gavin and Keith, and the thick folder made it real that this was months of documented harassment. Filing at the courthouse took 3 hours, and the clerk said a judge would review it, and I walked to the parking lot and cried on a bench, not from regret, but because legally telling your own mother to stay away is enormous. The temporary order got approved 3 days later, and 2 days after my mother was served, I woke to a voicemail where she said I was breaking her heart, and all she ever did was protect me, then shifted to saying I was making a terrible mistake, and one day I'd understand what I'd done, managing to be both guilt trip and threat in under a minute, and I saved it and filed another police report for violating the order. 3 weeks later, at the permanent hearing, my mother told the judge she was a worried mother who just wanted to know I was safe, and the judge asked if she knew I'd left voluntarily, and she said yes, asked if she knew where I lived and worked when she put up the flyers, and she said yes, asked if she'd been told I didn't want contact, and I confirmed multiple times, including a formal cease and desist, and the judge granted the permanent restraining order, telling my mother that her adult daughter had the right to live independently without harassment, that parental concern didn't override an adult child's right to set boundaries, that the flyers were deceptive because she knew I wasn't missing, and any more violations meant criminal contempt charges. My mother looked at me like I'd stabbed her, but someone with authority had finally told her she was wrong and said out loud that I had the right to my own life, and it hurt to watch her face, but something inside me could finally unclench. 3 months passed, and I started sleeping through the night, went back to my regular coffee shop and library and Saturday routine. The flyers were gone, nobody asked if I was the missing girl, and I rebuilt my sense of safety one normal day at a time, stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped checking for flyers, and existed in my own life without her shadow over it, and that made all the difference.